Dios les bendiga, mis hermanos. Pues en esta ocasión quiero presentarles el discurso que Peter Sonski, candidato a la presidencia por el American Solidarity Party, o en español sería el Partido Solidario Americano, el único partido verdaderamente pro vida como tal, y el único candidato que se adhiere a lo menos a los no negociables que Benedicto XVI dijo que un católico tendría que considerar a la hora de votar. En el caso de Donald Trump y mucho menos Kamala, en ellos dos no se cumplen esta base, si me permite una mente básica, porque no se está pretendiendo tener un candidato perfecto, pero en lo básico que se le pide a un candidato, al menos por parte de un católico, ni Trump ni Kamala lo tienen. El único que lo tiene es Peter Sonski. Pero por pues muchas cosas que tengo que estar haciendo, sigo lidiando con cuestiones de salud, no voy a poder doblar el discurso, ni siquiera subtitularlo al español. Lo voy a dejar en todo en inglés, pero aquí esta introducción la he querido hacer para anunciar que después haré una reacción a este discurso y en español obviamente, y en esa reacción iré traduciendo a lo menos la idea principal, no palabra por palabra, la idea principal, para que los seguidores que no hablan inglés puedan beneficiarse de este discurso que no tiene desperdicio. Sin más, los dejo con el discurso que dio Peter Sonski en su visita aquí a Los Ángeles, en el rally que tuvo en el Rose Garden, en el centro de Los Ángeles. Que Dios les bendiga.
Thank you so much. Very grateful to be here. It's a joy. It's an honor, actually, to be here. I'm grateful. It's not lost on me that I am addressing you in a rose garden. I hope to be doing this many times in the future on a rose garden about 3,000 miles east of here. But nonetheless, I think this one is probably going to outshine that one in size and beauty. And so it's a great place to be in Southern California. Why am I here? I'm here because, as Desmond has pointed out, as Mark has pointed out, and I think your witness just by being here is that we need a different direction. We need to change the way we are doing things in our political system in the United States. You know, I have a great respect and have had an interest since my childhood in politics. In fact, in high school, I was already speaking about my ambitions to be governor of Connecticut. I haven't made it yet, but I have been 3 different elected positions on a local level, and I believe that serving government is an opportunity for all of us. I won't say that it's an exclusive responsibility for all of us, but it is an opportunity, and it's also the chance to introduce ideas, introduce values, introduce a different way of thinking that most of the people that we have in government are unfamiliar with. There are many people whose voices are not heard because we're limiting the voices to just 2 parties of representation. And the system, while we continue to perpetuate it, while we continue to respect it, is not working for us in allowing us to introduce new and more valuable ideas. So I'm grateful for all of you being here today. I'm grateful for your willingness to be different. I'm grateful for your willingness to say that it's not only about being a citizen, being a patriotic member of society to vote, but I also want my vote to bring about something better, something different, a change that is going to set us in a new direction. So, my background. I told you that from my youth I was very interested in politics. I was registered as a Democrat from the very moment that I turned age 18. I grew up in a blue household. My great-grandparents on my mother's side immigrated from French Canada right after the Civil War. Now, for those of you who remember your history, after the Civil War, there was a lot of loss of life in the eastern part of the country, but there was also an end to slavery, and so there was opportunity now for employment, and my great-grandfather came to the United States and he worked in the textile industry, the fabric industry. My grandfather, on my father's side, immigrated from Eastern Europe at the end of World War I, 1920. So Eastern Europe is liberated, and he has an opportunity for a new start, to get out of the difficult circumstances that he was in Eastern Europe. So he comes to America, and he works in the textile industry. So both of my families grew up working in factories, working to make fabric, and from my youth, I can still remember just down the road from me, the looms, still operating up until the mid to late 1960s, making that fabric. Well, the textile industry has changed, as so many of our industries in the United States have changed. But the work ethic and the values that my parents taught me have not changed. Politics has changed. That very first election, Desmond was recounting his first election. My first election was Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, 1980. I think it's the last time that there have been two pro-life candidates vying for the presidency. I voted for Jimmy Carter. Ronald Reagan won, a former Democrat who had turned Republican, and he'd also done an awful lot of work to consolidate people who really had what I'll call conservative values. The Democratic Party that my parents knew and that I was brought up in enjoyed those conservative views. But they changed it about that time, and they decided to go in an alternate direction. They used to be called the party of the little guy. But about that time, they forgot about the little guy that was inside the womb. And it was at that time that I said, I can't support a party that is going to be promoting the destruction of defenseless, innocent human life. So I became a Reagan Democrat. And then I became a Reagan Republican. And I remained a Reagan Republican and really a member of the Republican Party until probably after the presidential term of George H.W. Bush, who was Reagan's vice president, so the early to mid 1990s. I couldn't find myself at home in the Republican Party because there were a number of values that the Democratic Party had instilled in me that the Republican Party eschewed. They didn't respect the rights of workers. They supported big government. And these were values that I thought, again, were unfair to a number of people. So I left, and I was politically homeless for decades. And I was doing my best to select the candidates that I believed most respected my views where I could find them. But I couldn't always find them. I had the same crossroads that Desmond mentioned in 2016, because the presidential election of Clinton and Trump was one that I could not select from among those candidates. I wound up voting third party that year, but I was even unhappy with my third party vote. In my searching, a friend introduced me to the American Solidarity Party in 2018, so the mid-year point, 2 years after the presidential election. I read what the party stood for, and it fit me like a glove. Everything that I value from the Democratic Party's position and everything that I valued from the Republican Party's position were brought together, and they harmonized. They made sense. They complemented one another in the platform of the American Solidarity Party. And I thought, why has nobody introduced this before? Well, then I started digging. And then I learned that indeed it had been introduced before. The ASP had run a candidate in 2016 and was planning to run a candidate in 2020. So I supported Ryan Carroll, and I was an elected official in my community, a member of a regional board of education, and I immediately identified myself as an American Solidarity Party representative. And I tried to bring the views and values of the ASP into my role as a school board member. And then, when the party was trying to select a person that they thought would represent its views on a national level in this presidential campaign, some members asked me, would I be willing to enter the primary and seek that nomination? And I was at a point in my life where I thought that it made sense to do so. And so I agreed to. I was one of initially 7 candidates, 5 that endured to the end, and the party selected me as their representative. So I'm honored to be representing not only the party, but more importantly, the values and principles it stands for. And so often today, values and principles seem to be a friendly term, but they aren't always held with conviction. I think we can talk about a certain vice presidential candidate who recently expressed some values and views as a senator that suddenly changed when the opportunity to become a member of the presidential ticket was made available to him. I may not win this election. I realize that my chances are longer than most, but I'm not going to change the values that I was chosen to represent. I'm not going to change the positions that I think need to be introduced into the public forum today. We need a different voice. We need a different view. And that is not coming from either the left side or the right side of the political spectrum. And the ASP doesn't belong on either side. Yes, it has views that are common with the left. It has views that are common with the right. But we're not necessarily centrist. Centrist often means mushy. It often means indecisive. That's not who we are. We believe very strongly in everything that we stand for. And it begins with a respect for the dignity of human life. Every piece of public policy that's passed is passed for the benefit of people. Is it education? Is it a respect for the environment? Is it interstate commerce? Is it healthcare? Is it housing? Is it foreign affairs? National defense? Everything comes back to being for the benefit of people. And we've forgotten that in society. We've put party elites and the party officials at the top of the food chain, and it's their interests most often that are being represented. The people who are casting the votes get a lot of promises and they get a lot of platitudes, but they don't often get the real results. And that's why I believe we can't perpetuate the system that we're in. The two-party system is not serving America. Plenty of places in the world have multiple party systems. Plenty of places in the world have collaborative government where there isn't one party that holds the majority. There isn't one party that's in complete control. Now I understand. Yes, the object of elections is to get elected and to be able to be in charge so that you can enact positive legislation. I respect all of that, but I also respect the fact that you can have collaboration. You can reach across the aisle. You can find ways that common ground can be determined and that you can pass measures that are beneficial for all people, not just some people. Bringing a third party into the equation is not going to hurt us. Bringing a third party into the equation is going to help us in so many ways. One thing that I will say that both the Republicans and the Democrats agree on, and it's not much these days, limit the competition. Don't allow third parties a chance to grow, to flourish, and to become a part of the political equation. Desmond and Mark mentioned to you about the requirements that I need just in order to be counted for write-ins here in California. And while it's unique in California that you have to have the alternates, it's still a requirement in many states that I have a full slate of electors. So what you're being asked to do today is what's been asked of many people across the United States. I'm on the ballot in just 7 states, meaning I'm a printed option with Lauren Onak, my vice presidential running mate, in just 7 states. So only voters in 7 states are going to be actually able to go in and find my name and select from among all of the candidates in that particular state running for the office of president or vice president. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because Each Secretary of State's office across all 50 states of the United States is run by either a Republican or a Democrat. And as I said a moment ago, they all agree on one thing: limit the competition. Some of the requirements to get on the ballot in states is completely onerous. 40,000 signatures in the state of Michigan I would have required in order to get on the ballot there. 40,000 signatures. Oh, by the way, you better get 50,000 because every single signature has to be validated. And if not every single one of them meets the standard, it gets dismissed and reduced from the count. So that's what we're facing. I accept that there needs to be a threshold. There needs to be a certain barrier to entry so that not every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants to be president of the United States can be on the ballot. That's reasonable. But what's not reasonable is onerous requirements that limit people like you from having a legitimate candidate who represents their views on the ballot in their state, that they can vote for, that they can tell the world, this is what I believe in. These are the values that I want to see brought forth in our country. So your support today means a lot to me. I realize that we could potentially fill these grounds if it was another party, because they have much more visibility and they have much more power to bring people here with the money that they've raised. I don't care about that. I realized when I got into the race that my chances of winning were very slim. As I've said to many reporters who've talked to me, well, my wife is not picking out fabric samples to change the drapes in the White House. I haven't ordered my address labels for 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I realize that in January, I'm probably going to be living in the same house that I'm living in today. But I will win if I can be an option for you so that you can tell the parties that are in power today that we don't agree with you, that we prefer another option. I will win if I can introduce ideas, if I can introduce values that are different, that are not being heard, that are representing people that are underrepresented today. I will win if I can grow the size of this party and grow it in influence so that people will truly know that there is a viable option, that we don't have to play the game that the two parties prefer that we play. We have the opportunity to make a difference. Now you're going to be told, as Desmond said, your vote is wasted. He's a spoiler. He's just stealing votes. He's not going to allow so-and-so to be elected. And oh my God, if so-and-so is elected, our country's going to hell in a handbasket. I got news for you. I kind of feel like we're already hell in a handbasket. I kind of feel we've already hit rock bottom, and we're not climbing back up. I think the time is legitimately now for the change. Voting for the American Solidarity Party may or may not get that change this year, but it'll get us started. It gets us moving. It gets us growing. And it gets people the confidence to know that we are a party that means business, that has real values, that will stick to those values, and that is not interested in just cronyism. It's not interested in just the interests of the party elites, the donor class. It's interested in the common good. It's interested in the people. That's what we need. Those are the differences that haven't been offered. So I thank you for being here today. I thank you for your willingness to come out in the sun and to hear me. I ask you, please, if you are able to be an elector, to participate in that. But more than anything, tell people that you know, that you met a presidential candidate today who you think can make a difference. You learned about a different party today with a set of views that complement each other, that don't work in opposition to one another, that people can identify with, that people can embrace, that they can value and say, I believe in that, and I believe that that is the direction that we need to go in as a nation. Throughout my campaign, I've used a term that's become a watchword for me: faithful to the truth. And it's from a phrase, quote from a person named Dorothy Day. Has anyone heard of Dorothy Day? Thank you. For those of you who don't know, Dorothy Day was a 20th century activist. She was born in New York City. She spent some of her early life here in Northern California. She ultimately landed in Chicago, and she went to school at the University of Illinois, and then she moved back to New York, and she began a movement called the Catholic Worker Movement. So she was very closely united with Cesar Chavez and the laborers here in California and in the Southwest. She spoke for them. She spoke for their rights. She was a pacifist. She believed very strongly that we should be at peace with one another, that we should be in solidarity with one another. She was arrested many times, and she had some shortcomings in her life, I guess you could say. She had an abortion. She was divorced. She had a penchant for getting arrested because of civil disobedience. And there were a lot of people that were turned off by Dorothy Day because of these things. They looked at her and some of the experiences that she had, and they said, no, I can't accept that. But Dorothy Day believed in principle, and she lived that principle, and she would not compromise that principle. And when Dorothy Day died in the 1980s, people were lined up to pay her tributes. And do you want to know something else? The Catholic Church, just a few years ago, submitted a request to the Vatican in Rome, the church in New York where she died, submitted a request to the church in Rome that Dorothy Day be considered a saint. So that quote from Dorothy Day, faithful to the truth, means so much to me. And the whole quote is, don't worry about being effective. Just worry about being faithful to the truth. And that's what I mean about not compromising principle. That's what I mean about knowing in your soul what's right and what's good. And not saying that, well, we should probably let the abortion pill be available to people, even though it kills 60% of the children, or results in 60% of the abortions in the United States. If you believe in the dignity of human life, you will acknowledge that there are many crisis pregnancies, and we've got to do our level best to find help for women who are in those crisis pregnancies. We've got to find proper health care for them. That's prenatal and delivery and postnatal. We need to find ways that they can have housing. We need to find ways in which they can have adequate wages. And we need to find ways in which maybe just one member of a household is all that's required to bring home earnings, so that the other parent can stay at home and rear the family like it used to be. Those are not ideals. Those are realities that we've forgotten. Those are realities that we can bring back and reintroduce. That's what the American Solidarity stands for. Those principles, those values. Yes, they'll take effort, because we've allowed for several years for us to go down a different path. And we need to turn the path around. And we need to come back in a direction that we know is right. But we can do that. We have to stop acquiescing to just saying, I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils. Because when you're voting for the lesser of two evils, you're always voting for evil. You can vote for a greater good. You may be in the minority this time, and you may be in the minority next time, but eventually you'll be in the majority, and you will be the vanguard, the voters that bring about that positive change that we need. The American Solidarity Party, as I said before, was a godsend to me. when I learned of it, I did all of my research about Christian democracy. I don't know if Christian democracy is a familiar term to you. Christian democracy is a political movement. It's popular in other places of the world. In Europe, it flourished in post-World War II. Its foundations are basically Catholic social teaching, with a lot of influence from the Neo-Calvinist movement, the Reformed Church movement, especially around post-World War II. All of these things combine to make a political movement that's been very successful in Europe and has spread to Latin America. The American Solidarity Party is that manifestation of Christian democracy in the United States. Now, when I say Christian democracy, I'm not talking about theocracy. I'm not talking about trying to get away with a civil government. I respect a civil government. I'm not suggesting that we are trying to turn everyone into Christians either. What I'm suggesting is that the Christian worldview looks at the good of all people. It looks at the common good. And it's adaptable in divine providence to a pluralistic society, so that we can implement values and positions that are for the good of everyone. And so I'm very happy to be representing those views, because I believe that they are unique, I believe that they are applicable, and I believe that they are appealing to a broad cross-section of our voters who just haven't had the opportunity to be introduced to it. So I'm asking for your support. Would you please cast a vote for Peter Sonski and Lauren Mack on November 5th? And would you please invite others to do so? As Desmond said, if you're a voter here in California, predictably we know the outcome. Predictably we know that this state is going to go in favor of the Democratic candidate. And one vote or two votes for either the Republican candidate or, more importantly, for a third-party candidate is not going to change that outcome. But what will change is that people will take notice of your votes. A third-party vote is measurable. If you are a person that's in fear of terrible policies that might come from one party or an odious candidate from another party, and you say, I cannot accept that, or I cannot accept that, so I have to vote for the other person, nobody knows that. Nobody understands that you have chosen to vote one way because of your opposition to the other way. But if you vote third party, they will clearly know that. They will know that you chose a distinct path. You said, I don't believe in this, I don't accept that. This is the path that I want to follow. Your vote is measurable. That's how we will progress. That's how we will introduce ourselves to others. That's how we will grow, and that's how we will bring change. It's hot, so I'm not going to stay here and continue to talk. I'm going to stay and answer any questions that you have, whether as a group or one-on-one. I'm grateful for your time, and I'm grateful for your support. God bless you all, and thank you.